where you work
Yeah.
to coming up. Like I was
Coming
fireman. I spent
Thanks for turning on the cold air, whoever did that, because it's hot as hell in here.
Did you sit next to Steve?
Yeah.
So on you, Cap, go ahead. Start your introduction.
Captain Steve Riley, work at Ladder 3213 unit. Started out at Station 1, went from there to Station 2, Station 2 to Station 16 for 9 months. Back to Station 2.
Seconds. And then he called for permission to come back to Station 2.
Back to Station 2, got promoted, went to Station 28 on Engine 2801 unit, and Lieutenant at 14s, got promoted, came down to the training academy as a captain, and then back out to Station 3213.
I still can't believe you left 14s.
One of the largest mistakes of my career, second.
Never forgive you. For
Second biggest mistake you ever made.
that. All right, Chief, what about you and your endeavors?
Battalion Chief Mike Ruddle. Currently, I'm Battalion 3 on 1 unit. Just try to go back through this list. Started out at 15s, and then I was at 17s for a period, 10s, 1s. I got promoted. I went to 2s as a lieutenant on an engine, and then I was at 8s for a significant portion of my lieutenant career. And then I got promoted to captain and floated around, then battalion chief, and went to Battalion 1 for a good period. And then that transitioned into Battalion 3, where I've been now for, I don't even know how
been a
long,
while.
8 years maybe.
You were captain in 6 weeks or something, and then chief, it seemed like.
That's a separate podcast.
You were Battalion 1 when we opened up new 2s.
Yeah.
And then you left shortly thereafter, and Mitch Brooks took it. So you're right. It's been 8 years probably.
Yeah, it's been a
Battalion
while
3.
because I took over from Jim Davis.
Mm-hmm.
So, just some great learning. Been around some great people, and it seems like it just happened yesterday. But now, when you have to go through it, it seems like it's been a lot longer.
Yeah. And what about you, LT, the problem child that is Station 15?
Pipeline ingredients? That's a weird way
Yeah,
to say
pipeline.
that.
Just 14s guys say their problems is 15s, but that's it. I get it, Nick, that's all good.
Yeah.
So I came out Station 15. I was very fortunate at that. There for about 7 years or so, and then got recruited by this maniac lieutenant that was at 8s at the time, Mike Ruddle, and I went up to 8s for a while. Got promoted out of there. Learned a lot from Chief Ruddle, Captain Rogan Camp while I was there. 8s for a little while, then went to the training academy for a little while after I got promoted. Got involved in the iPads, which was a mess at the time. And then got all that set up. Luckily, it's all working now. And then eventually what's left there, went back to 15s on 3 unit. And I've been hanging out there ever since. So I've got a great group of people I work with there.
And the great Billy Ross.
The Grand Poobah.
A great Billy Ross.
Enough. Well, many years ago, I came out at Station 2 on Engine 3 as a firefighter. By the way, Lieutenant Bill Ross, I'm currently assigned to Ladder 2 on 2 unit. But like I said, I came out at 2s on Engine 3 and had a great first officer. His name was Lieutenant Mark Robinson. Spent a couple of years on Engine 3, and at the time you could go through P school and not be a journeyman. And myself and Rich Richardson went through P school together. And when I came out of there, they had just created a position on Rescue 2 as the 4th person, because it was just 3 people assigned. So I was fortunate enough, I don't know how, but I transferred to Rescue 2, so I was on Rescue 2 with some tremendous firefighters: Bob Cloud, Art Lewis, John Hill, Jim Lewis. Just great learning experience, and I was promoted off Rescue 2. And shortly after I was promoted, I was transferred to Engine 22 on 1 unit. So that was my experience on 1 unit. Spent 9 months there, met some great guys, had quite a handful of fires as well. I was surprised in 22's district, but I got a lot of first-in fires, so that was a good learning experience. I came back to Battalion 1, floated for a couple of years, then I became the officer of Engine 3 when Captain Steve Cheshirr, he got promoted, left a vacancy there, so I spent 16 years back on Engine 3 as a lieutenant and had great crews there. Finally, when twos split up, the divorce happened, and they built threes. Of course, we all moved into threes for a little while, but I knew Engine 2 was going to come back downtown. So I transferred off Engine 3 to Engine 2. Prior to the split, I was a lieutenant on Engine 2 until my current assignment, Ladder 2. So I'm one of probably the few company officers that have been assigned to every vehicle, every fire vehicle that have been in Station 2. And that's really the only place I've worked, minus a short stint at 22s and a couple of years at Ladder 5. That was weird, but that's what got me interested into ladder work, right? So spent a couple years at Ladder 5 with, again, guys from 2s. We got displaced when they split us up while they were rebuilding the new firehouse. And I came back downtown. I've been there ever since.
What year did you start at 2s?
87.
So Doug Atkins spoke so highly of those members that were there when he came out, and that was a little bit later, but he just talked about they were all Vietnam vets and they were just a different generation.
Oh yeah, they were.
But they had a lot of knowledge, and you had to dig it out of them.
An incredible group, right? And it's the epitome of the salty senior firefighter. I mean, you had some guys that were young like myself, but you know, a good story. Greg Lash always tells it, but I tell it too.
You tell it better.
I don't know. I don't know. Greg can tell a story, and he can engage you. But he was the first guy I met when I walked in the back of 2s on my first day. He was standing out back, and he walked up and he said, "Welcome to Fire Station 2. I'm Greg Lash." He was assigned to Ladder 2 at the time, firefighter. And he had always done work on his days off, landscaping, snow plowing, you name it. He constantly worked. But Greg was standing next to his blue and white Suburban, parked on the back ramp. The fenders were rusted out. The thing was falling apart. I can't describe how rough this truck looked. And he looks at me with a smile that Greg has, and he says, "About 15 or 20 years, you can have something like this." I was thinking as I was shaking his hand, I said, "Man, I hope not." But that caliber of firefighter, everybody knows who Captain Greg Lash is. But that caliber of firefighter was everywhere in that firehouse. Bob Cloud, Jim McConaughey, by the way, just passed away a couple of days ago. He was there as a firefighter. He was the station cook. I mentioned my first officer, Mark Robinson, Lieutenant Butch Olney, Lieutenant Chuck Sherfy, just studs.
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame guys, right. Rescue 2 on one unit had John Dill, Rusty Ambrose, Dave Karn. Rescue 2 on 3 unit had Vic Runkle, John Brining, who was their third. I'm drawing a blank. I don't know why. But just phenomenal guys, and you were exactly right. You hit on it. Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
Just, again, those guys, they wouldn't walk up to you and say, "Hey, let's go try this. Let's go do that." But if you were there and you were willing, they'd show you anything you wanted to know.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
So we
And
took a
all those
little
guys-
time to figure that out.
All those guys probably could have wrote a book on their experience.
Oh, sure.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
And Nick, real quick, talking about some of the stuff that we picked up from the true, like what we considered the salty vets back then, and they weren't always just sharing stuff, but we came out with the latest and greatest, tools and equipment and uniforms, and I didn't come out till '91, but still remember being around Brining. We got the hoods, and he didn't wear a hood. right? He wasn't a believer in the transformation of the fire department into a hood, which dates what we're talking about. They talked about even going from day boots to bunker gear. But he was a firm believer, which will lead into what we're talking about today, is he felt like without a hood, he could get a better feel for the conditions and where he should and shouldn't be. And they took that as the way they learned. They were uncomfortable with not being able to have those kind of senses available to them.
Right.
And I do think that all kind of leads in today with how we've tried to learn and adapt with the equipment we have, the protective gear we have, to still be able to get those senses without getting burnt, being protected, but still having to use different tools and techniques now to understand the environment, to keep people from getting hurt.
And I've heard that from seniors. There's still guys on today that keep their ear out of their hood. And you guys were talking about feeling the heat, like with Leffy's story and a couple other guys. I kind of correlate it to a bodybuilder because a lot of bodybuilders just put the weight on their shoulders to feel it. So like we should kind of do the same thing with the heat. That's why we do flashover trailer and all that, just to feel it, see what it feels like.
So I think that's a great springboard into what we're doing today. So we'll give like 2 seconds of background as far as why we're here and what our thought process was. So we ran some training recently over off Wilson Road, had some live burns, got some really good stuff out of it, right? We did some searching and we did some knee wall evolutions, and we kind of created this training stuff, and we're like, man, this is great, but what do we do with it? And, how do we get it out there? And so long story short, we get in touch with Nick in the PIO's office, and we come up with this little conglomerate of training and PIO land and Signal O podcasts, and we thought, what better way to get some of these tactics out to the membership than through Signal O? And so what we decided to do is we're like, well, we're gonna roll with it. We're gonna get some heavy hitters in a room. We're gonna put them at a table, and we're gonna give a platform to talk about Columbus Fire, for Columbus Fire, and talk about the stuff that's not in the SOPs, the stuff that's not in black and white. It's not a bulletin, it's not a policy, it's not a procedure. This is what am I doing when I'm crawling around inside a burning building? And we thought, what better way to do it than this? So with that, we're just going to dive in. And the first thing we were going to hit on is today's episode. So season 2 of Signal O, we're going to dive into knee walls, right? And we'll kind of build off that and talk about the training fire later. But for now, Cap, I was hoping to kind of start with you and throw it out there, and then for everybody, we talk and we hear this term knee walls all the time in Columbus, and we hear it all across the countries and in podcasts and training videos. Can you walk me through what does it even mean? What is a knee wall? What is it? What is a half story? I hear Cape Cods. I hear all these different terms. We'll throw it to you. You just explain it to me like I have no idea what's going on.
So in its most simple explanation, knee walls, and mainly the context we're going to be talking about them today, they were used to make attic space usable space. They had a couple different side effects that were positive in that typically knee walls were erected in 3 to 4 foot height. They created living space in a half story and otherwise unusable space. They supported roof rafters, so they were structural as well. They also created storage space around the outside of the building. So they give us otherwise unusable space, they make it usable space. They're still used in construction today. Typically when we think of knee walls, we think of older builds, downtown German Village, campus, places like that, but they're still used today. We see them at 32s. So that's a quick general down and dirty overview of what a knee wall is.
From a command perspective, kind of geared towards you, Chief, and I've heard incident commanders ask this, like, do we use story and a half, or just call it a 2-story, or do we call it what it is, like a Cape Cod? We talked about just dormer windows. What in your mind do you listen for to key into a knee wall?
I think the here and the half story is probably the broadest term. Cape Cod is to me like putting a brand name on something like Q-tip.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to make a plug like that?
Yeah,
brought to you by General
Trademark
Mills.
that.
Yeah, put it at the end.
Yeah, no. To me,
There'll be disclaimers.
right? They both give the same indication to me as what we're dealing with. Anytime I hear half story or Cape Cod, and to me, it's just if we generally understand what we're looking at, which leads back to the knee walls and the void spaces with either one of the terminology. I think some guys tend to lean towards saying Cape Cod when they see the 1.5 stories versus a Georgian or a campus, 2.5-story house that's got the knee walls, maybe doesn't have dormers, but still has the same type of voids and stuff on the inside with a finished attic space. So there's no right or wrong on that. Just trying to convey the information to everybody else coming in, what we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, I've never pulled up and given a rundown and called it a 2.5-story Victorian. It's either a 2-story, 2.5 if I see dormers or I see attic windows or I see some of those things that are kind of telltale signs of potentially finished space up there in that half-story. I just call it a half-story. Don't worry about it. I've never called it a Cape Cod. I don't have many of those in my district, but I've got a lot of 2.5-story wood frame balloon construction, and they may or may not be finished upstairs. Who knows till you get there.
I think anytime you throw that half-story thing in there, instantly everybody's thinking
Sure.
knee walls.
I
anyway.
agree.
And that's like an indication to you that it's a finished space. We need to get up there and check it. Obviously check the basement. But what's running through your mind tactically as you're rolling up? Obviously in 15's district, you kind of have an idea of where your storing halves are. But what's rolling through your mind when you're rolling up and you see smoke rolling out of the attic space or the half story?
Well, I think the bigger thing for us, if we go towards 21's area, we're going to have a lot more 1.5-stories versus if we go north towards 8's, we're going to have more of the 2.5. Like this fire on here, and I don't know if you can see very well, but so that was a 2.5-story, and that one was actually pretty interesting, and learned a ton from that fire. Just really more mistakes that I made than anything else. Just in the fact that as we pulled the line through this, the attic wasn't going too bad yet, and when we got to the second floor, there wasn't a lick of smoke on it. I mean, it was as clear as this room is right here. So didn't think there was anything going on at 2, didn't see anything on the second floor. And then when we got to the attic, it was pretty warm. We got up there with, I think Ladder 8's crew went through the front with us, and Ladder 15 was on the back side. And so when we got in the attic, we're searching for the fire. I think it was up there, Corey Uzzi, Ethan Heigl, Caleb Baker, and Joe Panetta were up there, and which is a huge crew.
That's a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight.
Well, it's a huge fire crew.
You don't need to throw out weight numbers.
It's a huge fire crew, and I'll explain why that happened in a minute, because that was another lesson we learned. But and then Ladder 8's crew, Dan Long was up there, and as we're searching for it, if you haven't seen before a fire's going to flash or notice it, it just starts getting blacker,
And lower.
and gets to the floor, and then it starts getting hot. And we weren't getting any relief. We were looking for the fire. We weren't really making much headway as far as finding that. We were trying to open up as many areas as we could, and we just were not making much headway. And so we had called for a hole, and they were working on it, but it was getting so warm. We got back to the stairs just to kind of reset ourselves. And then about that time, I think Ladder 15 had come through the back and actually found that there was a bathroom underneath us on the second floor that was completely closed up. And that was where all the fire really was all hanging out, and it had gotten all in the voids. There was a kitchen they had built on the back side of this in the attic area. And it was all through that void space in the kitchen, and we didn't
So like the
catch it on the
Charlie
second
Delta
floor.
corner area was where the bathroom was, or
The kitchen was like more like a Charlie Bravo corner.
Bravo corner?
So, but once Carmen DiCarlo had radioed, hey, we found it in this bathroom on the second floor, then we knew, okay, well, at least we got a good idea, and we had to kind of change what we were doing a little bit there. But it was just a good learning experience, because we thought we had the second floor clear, we thought we were good to go, and then come to find out, it actually wasn't. But like I said, if you looked at that second floor, you'd have never thought in a million years that there was any fire going on that thing. It was just so
When you
closed up.
mentioned it was closed off, had they just put up walls and kind of forgot about that bathroom, or just the bathroom door was closed and it wasn't letting anything out that was in the bathroom?
It was just the bathroom door was closed.
Okay,
But
so
they had
it-
opened up part of it. Inside the bathroom, they had redone a couple of the walls because they had run the plumbing from the
Right.
bathroom up to the kitchen that was
Yeah.
above it. And they were using some of the water lines and things. So
Okay.
it was a little bit of a remodel, but still mostly, I think that bathroom on the second floor was just just happened to be holding everything. I mean, it was a true wood door.
Yeah,
on
well,
it.
when you got a solid core, a solid wood door,
Yeah.
yeah, you can,
And I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of, like Brian Miller had one a couple of weeks ago where he just announced it's in the knee walls. So tactically, as an officer, when you're rolling in, you're doing your 360, are you going to try to stay ahead of your hose line just to like poke hose in the stairwell? Make sure you're not passing fire on the first floor, or are you just going in with them simultaneously? Like, what are you thinking tactically as we're approaching to get into the knee wall space?
well, when I hear things like, hey, I'm pretty sure it's in the knee walls, or you get a pretty good indication that you got a lot of brown smoke hovering around the eaves, you don't have a lot of fire showing, you're kind of thinking void space, and of course they announced it. One, you still have to clear all the floors below, because I can't count how many times I've been on fires where the bathroom ceiling fan
Is the
is the origin, and it just melts and drops in the bathroom, but all the fire, there's not a lick of fire that shows right there, but everything goes right into the void space. Or in Steve's case, it's behind one of those solid wood doors. You really have to slow down and make sure you're not passing anything that's below you. Of course, in our districts, every one of us worked in the areas with balloon frame construction, so you could have a basement
roll
fire.
out the basement, right?
You can have a basement fire, and that's what's really good is what's happened with our rundown since we've had enough basement fires, had enough guys being exposed or floors falling in, or guys getting trapped on second floors because of a basement fire. We're really doing a better job of making sure it's not in the basement prior to guys being exposed to it upstairs. But like you mentioned, Nick, when you get to the top of those attic stairs or whatever your access point is, open up knee walls at the stair area. Don't go into an attic space and start opening things up and not be near the stairs, because the first thing you want to look for is anything coming out of that void space under pressure.
Right.
Am I going to see fire? Am I going to see smoke being pushed out of there? Or when I bust this one open, it's clear. I can stick my camera in there.
Right.
If it's not this knee wall, let's look at the other one. But do it all from the staircase. And chances are the ladder company probably won't be the first ones there, up there, but we're going to be right behind that hose team. And just a lesson for the hose team is have your hand tools with you. Open those walls up prior to diving up into that attic space.
And then as like a ladder crew, you hear that knee wall announcement. Is that cueing your guys in on the ladder truck?
Yeah,
Get to the roof.
we're talking about immediately, we're talking about get a good place to set this thing up. If you can put the aerial to the roof, do it, but we're also thinking, and again, in our environment, 9 times out of 10, it's a 2.5 story. So
Right.
it's not gonna be that 1.5 story, Cape Cod style. Have a few of them, but not many. But yeah, we're just trying to get a good setup on the truck and have the outside team go to work.
Yeah. What do you got, Ethan?
No, I guess I was just gonna keep rolling with it as far as like inside, and I think we get complacent's a bad word, but we get so comfortable with the fact that we're gonna throw a ton of bodies at this, we're gonna have a lot of resources. I think knee walls are relatively intricate, really can't talk, intricate fires, right? As far as there's a lot of steps that have to happen in the right order or else things go wrong. And so I guess there's 100 years sitting at the table at least. And my question to you guys is, over these years, what are things you do on these knee wall fires inside the building, from an interior ladder crew to an interior hose line to, as far as things that race through your mind, or little tactical things and decisions you make that have just been passed down through time, and things that have gone well and gone poorly inside these fires, and experiences you've had, and just curious to hear it all.
That aren't in the book.
Yeah, that aren't in the book, right? It's not your IFSTA book that says, okay, well, I need,
Yeah, you gotta do this,
I need a person on the corner of the stairs to manage hose. Okay, thanks. I'm well aware of that. What else do I need to think about? I guess I'll send that back to you guys.
It's going to take a little longer is the one thing I would just throw out there before Captain Riley is going to give you some real knowledge, I'm betting. I think it's going to take a minute just because we had a knee wall fire the one time, and I think I got asked for a canned report 6 times before we got to the, to the attic, which, all good on canned reports, and I understand
Hold on a
them.
second, Chief. Let me genie myself up there and I'll tell you what's going on.
But it's a
Hey, you
little,
look
it's a
right
little
in
thick.
his
Yeah.
eyes. He made that personal.
Yeah.
Not throwing any
You can
smoke
throw
or
it in.
anything.
Yeah.
But it's just gonna take you an extra couple minutes to get some things opened up. So it's not gonna be as fast as your normal if you just have a kitchen fire and things like that.
From my standpoint, on a ladder company at least, lots of tactical considerations when we know something's probably a knee wall fire going into it. The big one, as Steve just hit on, is slow down. Obviously we're searching for life as we advance as a ladder crew, but we're also looking for fire. Where is this thing? Where's it extending to? Where's it been? So on the way up there, monitoring temperatures with my tick is a big one. That's a great tool. The thermal imager shows us a lot of things if we use it. I'm guilty as well, that many times that thing hangs off me as I run through a house and I don't raise it up as I should. But monitoring temperatures is probably the biggest. I can see through drywall, I can see through lath and plaster, I can see heat signatures on those. So utilize that tool, find out where the heat's at, find out where the main body of fire is, or where it's going. And likewise, don't get to, traditionally, we get ahead of the engine company going into the structure. Don't just arbitrarily go to that half story and start pulling things. That is a big problem, and where we get into trouble, I think, many times, is that we get ahead of the engine company or ahead of that initial hand line. We get up there and start pulling walls, puncturing through knee walls. We're opening it up and allowing it to breathe and causing that rapid fire development event before the hand line's in place and ready to operate. So communication and coordination is one of the biggest things with these, is that we need to do things as the engine company is ready for. Arbitrarily venting or taking out knee walls, that creates big problems for us. So we have to work together and coordinate that ventilation and fire attack. And as Lieutenant Ross mentioned earlier, when you're poking those holes in knee walls on a suspected knee wall fire, make those small. We tend to get upstairs with pipe holes and just start pulling things down. Just make a small inspection hole. We don't need to take out a whole wall. We don't need to take out a 4-foot section. Just make a small inspection hole, and that's going to tell us a lot.
And I think Steve's spot on, right, with some of that stuff. And uncoordinated ventilation, when you hear things like we think it's in the knee walls, it can take things sideways quick. Asking too many times on the radio is a pet peeve of mine myself. There's a learning curve for that, right? Because things look different when you're anchored in the front yard, watching conditions change, which don't always look the same as they do from the inside or feel from the inside. And I think we all know that good intel from the interior of a structure paired with what you can see clearly on the outside is what drives the tactics. If Steve's in the half story with a tick saying, we don't have much heat, but we haven't found it yet, that means something different, right? Than he's like, we haven't found it. It's getting hotter. We need to get the roof opened up and things like that. And we're watching the smoke conditions change, right? It's more turbulent. It's getting darker. That stuff tactically outside starts to become a concern. And it takes a while to learn the reaction factor, right? We all come up through working on engine companies, ladder companies, and deploying a hose line. And when you ask for somebody else to do something that you're used to doing yourself, and you're waiting,
There's a reflex time.
Doesn't ever
Yeah.
happen as fast as you want it
Like
to.
30 seconds probably feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah, so it does, and I think you want that feedback because you're trying to make the decisions. Life safety, right? And I think the ladders and the rescues for sure, right? They have to get in, and it takes time to deploy a line and deploy it effectively. We do it well, we practice it well, but getting up and getting ahead of them and getting to that floor and getting a primary search, getting that checked off. They do an inspection hole to make sure they can search it safely. Somebody comes in on a hose line and then pokes an inspection hole underneath, and then somebody takes out a window, and now you've got conditions that are going to change rapidly. And we've seen those multiple times here, and I'm sure all over the country. And those are the things I think people have to take in mind. I don't know that all that stuff is in the books that people read, but once you've been inside it and felt it, it's unmistakable.
It's a dry heat.
Yeah, and
It's a dry heat.
it's a dry heat.
It's a sauna. It's a sauna.
And one of the things I think in feeling that and understanding it and processing it and communicating it, right? Because these guys may be on the same page inside, but getting a good, clear communication so everybody understands it. And I know one of the things that sticks out in my mind as a new lieutenant, and we were sent on a storm run, right, all by ourselves, and we get down there and it was a lightning strike, and the attic, it was pumping out good smoke, right? So we were ahead of everybody. You couldn't hear sirens coming yet. Well, as we were going up the stairs, so good and bad for that, we got up and it was hot. And I was calling right for vertical ventilation when the ladder gets there, is in the knee walls and all that stuff. And when you feel the heat release from the inside, when you got good ladder company operations with vertical ventilation, it's real, and it makes you feel good. The other thing I'll tell you though from that story that I'll never forget is when you hear a chainsaw running above your head on a roof, you cannot get close enough to the floor because you don't know if somebody up there is going to plunge that bar all the way in or not.
I think I remember hearing you on the radio a couple months ago, like, "Hey, we're right under you. Be careful."
Yeah, Clay Signs and I were a lot closer than we wanted to be. You're
Yeah,
100% right.
you want that vent hole, but you can't get far enough away from that bar.
It was definitely closer. But I will say, for our ladder companies in the last couple of years, and vertical ventilation has been amazing. Like, our ladder company has been killing it, and I don't know if it's just a change in culture or I know a lot of things the Salisbury and towns do with the Facebook page with the ladders and stuff now is really neat, and there's a lot of information out there, but we're definitely cutting more holes than I've ever seen in my career.
As a truck company, you're going to make the ladder page if you get on the roof, so you have to get up there,
That's
whether
true.
you're cutting
You
it or
gotta
not.
be
You're
on there.
gotta be on the
You're
roof.
definitely making social media.
Yeah, you're going to get on the page.
And I think what happened, though, if you remember a few years ago when FlowPath really came out, we kind of went to the complete other end of the spectrum. And I think initially when it came out, we didn't fully understand what FlowPath was really doing. And so what happened was we just kind of stopped ventilating altogether.
Yeah.
And as an engine company, that was awful because everything was just black as could be. The smoke was just always boiling. You didn't see the fire coming out as much, but it was still hotter than heck, and you didn't have your vision anymore. And so as an engine company with zero vision, it just took a long time to get to the seat of the fire. And so then I think, a few years ago now, we kind of started to understand a little better what FlowPath is.
Yeah.
And then we shifted gears and started doing vertical ventilation. And if you've been in a fire now and you've seen when they open up that vent hole, I mean, you're getting your vision back right now. You can see, you can get to the seat of the fire and get water on it quicker. So as an engine company, I'm super happy that we're doing vertical ventilation. And I know there's a lot of chiefs out there nationally that don't love it because it's dangerous to be on a roof, and I get all that. But like I said, as an engine company or people working inside, that vertical ventilation is amazing.
Well, there's definitely a comfort level in our district, being the older construction, the 80-year-old homes, the 100-year-old homes.
The ordinary construction,
The ordinary,
heavy nominal wood.
you're fairly confident it's
True
going to hold
dimensional
up.
lumber.
It's going to hold up to fire conditions. When I spent that little bit of time out in Five's district on Ladder 5, we got into a bunch of lightweight stuff. I was riding Ladder 5 with Mark Mance and several other guys that were at 5s and from 2s, and we had exactly that same thing. Lightning strike hit the attic, but it was lightweight construction, and Mark cut everything from the ladder because he couldn't put his foot on the roof. But getting that ventilation open and getting that thing opened up so that we could track everything down was key. Otherwise, we weren't making any headway.
Was that the era where they were using like the CFST lines that were like braided for the gas lines? Maybe
Yeah,
like pinhole
yeah,
walls.
it's still that type of construction, so it's, you know, I've got that in my house,
Yeah,
right? And I've got, scary, but I would like to tell every firefighter, before you come in my house, sound the floor.
yeah.
Right in the front door, because I've got those silent floor things, the wooden I-beams.
Yeah.
I know they're terrible,
But it's that's the code.
you know, but that's how we're building them. My house is 22 years old, so we've been doing it a while, and we call it lightweight modern construction, but it's not that modern,
Right.
right? We've been doing it for a while. But that was the difference. When I come back downtown, I know I can get on that roof for a while, right? And not worry about it dropping out from under me.
Well, they gotta be caught when you're living in a house that's 8,000 square foot. They gotta do some.
That's
They
just.
gotta span long distances. Wooden I-beams are great for
That's
that.
not even counting the basement.
I don't know, out at the Ross
not all
National Park.
It's not a walkout, so it's not a living space.
So, and then kind of going with that as far as calling for ventilation and being inside and making those decisions of when you want it opened up. I know I was talking to Lieutenant Robinson the other day and trying to be better about where you want that opened up and making sure we're not opening it. The same kind of aspect goes as, hey, I'm asking for ventilation, on the Charlie side, on the Bravo side, open up the Delta side. Same kind of theory goes, I'm assuming, Caps, and correct me if I'm wrong, as far as like, that's why I'm not opening up a 4x4 section of hole on the stairwell when I'm coming in, to make sure that, I don't draw this fire behind us. I don't give it a place to go that I don't want it to go, kind of thing. Maybe you can just speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, so in knee wall fires, as far as we mentioned the flow path a little bit earlier, we're already a little behind the 8 ball when we arrived because of flow path that we can't control is already established just by engineering design on those half stories. So the soffits or eaves are designed to breathe. They're ventilated. Ridge vents are designed to breathe. They're already ventilated. So the fire gets ahead of us because it can draw air in through the soffits and exhaust out the ridge vent. The problem is the exhaust is not big enough to get rid of that heat. So I just want to enlarge that. And ventilation on a knee wall fire is difficult because we tend to just arbitrarily think, hey, I need to get to the roof and perform vertical ventilation. If you do it in the wrong place, and by wrong place I don't mean side of the building, I mean on a much smaller scale, you're not accomplishing ventilation effectively. So we have to remember that in knee wall fires, there's a void space above or in the ceiling of that half story, as well as a void space on the eaves sides. So would be traditionally the Bravo and Charlie sides. The exception to that would be like a mansard style roof. You could have a knee wall 360 degrees, a void space, 360 degrees all the way around you. So sometimes ventilation on the gable end on the leeward side is the most effective path. In the case of the dormers that were just previously up there in the picture, when you're ventilating near a dormer, you have to make sure that you go above and below where the dormer meets the roof line because of the void space on the side of the knee wall from the interior. So we need to be able to exhaust both of those spaces. So we want to cut a hole that runs from, let's say, a foot below the ridge line down to a foot below where the dormer meets the roof line. So we want to open up a little differently. Sometimes low on the gable end is the best option to ventilate that void space. The living space is not the problem. So we go in and we ventilate a window that we see on the half story. The living space isn't the problem. That ventilated window is not really doing anything for us to get rid of that heat that's accumulated in the void space. So sometimes low on the gable end in that void space on the leeward side is the place to be. So we just have to, as outside ladder companies, members operating outside, they have to think what's the best place to ventilate this in the case of a knee wall fire. It's not just jumping on the roof and cutting a 4x4 hole somewhere on the roof.
Yeah, well, I'll pull it up here as I fight through the computer. And that was kind of something that I wanted to segue into as that training fire we just did. And one of the scenarios we ran at the end of each day for 1 and 3 unit were, hey, you have a knee wall fire. As I fight through the computer. So hey, we have this knee wall fire, and understand that there is a there's 2 things. There's a delay, like you talked about, like this isn't an instantaneous cut, and the other thing is making sure that we are appropriately, oh man, I am messing this computer thing up, sorry guys. Let's re-pull this up. So, let's see if we can get any of this to work for me. Let's just restart. This is our pause, James, that we talk about.
Okay.
I don't know why I was fighting this so bad. Alright, so I think the video's in here. Okay, perfect. So, we'll restart that whole thing. So, Kat, kind of just to kind of go off what you were talking about here, you know, we had these videos that we kind of threw together after the Wilson Road training fire, and there's 2 of them. They're 5 minutes long. We'll just kind of throw them up in the background while you guys talk. But was the amount of time that this takes. So like here we have a stage scenario, right? We know we're going to flow water. We know it's in the knee walls, and we have a ladder, you know, ready to ventilate. And making sure that we both ventilate high and ventilate low and capture the collar space and then capture the actual knee wall void space. But the amount of time this takes from the minute you decide and call for it and pull up on scene to actually performing and getting that opening and that ventilation, you know, is relatively long. And 5 minutes on a Fireground, I mean, we listen to fires go out every day. Their situation contained water on the fire, tie up on scene companies. And
5-6 minutes.
5-6 minutes and the entire incident is done. And it almost seems like if you're not thinking this while responding, that man, I gotta open this up as soon as I get there and work towards it, we're behind the 8 ball, right? I mean,
Absolutely. As an outside ladder member, driver, or the backseat outside firefighter, as soon as you hear half story in a rundown, you have to be preparing for vertical ventilation as soon as you arrive. Obviously, our 2 priorities when we pull up on the ladder company and a knee wall fire, we know that crews are going to be operating on a second or a half story, so we want means of egress for them, and then vertical ventilation is second. So want the outside member from the back seat can be throwing ground ladders to give these guys somewhere to go, and then the operator should be setting the truck up immediately, because if we wait, and that's on any fire, not just a knee wall fire, if we wait until the incident commander calls for vertical ventilation, we're behind. I should already be prepping for that. You know, Chief should hear the outrigger alarms going off on the truck and know exactly what we're doing. And Chief will let us know, hey, hold off, but I'm sure you would much rather that truck be set up and ready to operate than wait till you tell us.
Yes, I mean, I'm of the mindset that I shouldn't be asking for it. I like aggressive ladder companies. I think vertical ventilation, we've moved in that direction. We were away from it for a while for whatever reason, but I think the benefits of it far outweigh anything else. You can't, you know, let the interior people not have a working environment where they can do their job or get burnt because they can't get the proper ventilation. And I think I've started to see over the last, you know, few years a lot more. The ladder companies get there and they've trained and worked hard on it. It's dangerous, but it's necessary. And as you see here in the video, right, engine companies recognize now more than ever, right, that the placement, you allow the ladder company to get the placement they need so they can operate safely. But vertical ventilation is imperative when you're talking about knee walls. It doesn't happen fast, but everything we can do to put things in place to make it work faster. I'll call for vertical ventilation if I don't think it's, you know, in the process. But I'm surprised anymore we pull up and we have a fire like this where I don't hear like outriggers. And if I hear that going on, I know that they're not just setting it up, right, for a picture. So these guys do a phenomenal job. And as long as we're on the same page, because I like to leave our channel, our main fire channel open so I can hear good feedback from the inside for what's needed, and less just talking just to talk on the radio and tie it up. And you know, for me, when I'm seeing stuff like this, I'm waiting to hear from the inside, right? What's the heat conditions? You know, where do we need lines placed? We talked earlier about making sure the floors below don't have any conditions that need addressed. But this is going to change everything for us.
What was the heat change? Did you guys track before and after they cut the hole?
For sure, and I'll go to the next video here that kind of shows the side by side. It's kind of cool. They have the thermal imaging inside, and then they have an actual thermal drone.
Ethan, tell me where was that fire located? Was that second floor? Or was
Yeah.
that?
So this is the second floor or the half story of the Cape Cods, and it was in the Bravo side. So they're venting.
So in the living space, right?
Yeah. So this video, the fire itself is in the actual living space in the second floor. The next video, the fire is in both the living space and the knee wall, and you see it in the ventilation, right? Like, and I'll show the video, but you actually have fire and good smoke coming out of both of those openings. And the biggest thing is when this one was planned that we saw, and that's Derek Byler on the inside there, is as soon as that top cut gets made, the flow path and the visibility are night and day. Everything gets sucked up and out.
I was going to mention that because I watched that video, and if you haven't seen it,
Yeah.
right, if you're crawling through these places and you want to know where the fire is, look for that convected air to be drawn in, because I saw it in the video on the left-hand side.
Yes.
You can see the convected smoke being drawn past that camera and drawn right into the opening.
Oh, from back to
Yep.
front?
From
And then-
back to front, it's going past the camera towards the fire.
Yep, and then as soon as he actually pokes drywall in this, and I mean, the videos are as close to synced as you can, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as he actually pokes this drywall, kind of backs away from this hole, you'll see Derek kind of turn to his left, and he points and highlights the new layer, right? So like the new flow path and where the smoke's getting drawn in, and you can see it really well here. He'll turn
Yeah,
his
you can
head to
see
the
it
left.
now,
Yeah.
really
See,
moving,
so right there, see it?
really moving.
So this is a tactical consideration as far as we make it up there, our visibility's limited, we can't find the fire. Let's back up a little bit, wait on the ladder crew to cut the hole, and then watch it from that tick, and then we can make our advance.
And I remember years ago, senior firefighters telling me, if you can't find the fire, get on your face and put your flashlight right in front of your mask
And see.
and watch the smoke draw towards the fire. It'll lead you there every time.
Yeah,
And
and
it's kind of cliche, but it's breathing.
Yeah, exactly right.
you know, we always talk about camera.
Right.
85% of the people inside don't have the camera.
Right, 100%.
So what are their cues? What are they looking for? And how are they making their way through this? And I'll pull up the other video while you guys keep talking. And in that next one, yeah, Bill, just like you said, it's fire in the living space and an actual.
And now
small
I can
set.
see everything in that room.
And it's amazing. And I know, Lieutenant Cheshirr, you've always said this, give me my eyes and I can function, right? If I don't have eyes, I'm like 10, 20% in there fumbling around trying to figure it out. But if you give me my eyes, I'm 80 to 90% effective.
So one thing you can look at, and you'll hear it more on fires that they didn't do a lot of ventilation on, is you'll hear somebody say, I couldn't even see my tick camera. If they come out, and I couldn't even see the screen on my tick camera. Not 100% of the time, obviously, but if we'd got some ventilation, or at that point maybe we hadn't ventilated yet, that's part of why you can't see. But if
Look
you
at the
think
heat
of it
rise
as
in that corner video when that water hits that fire, where
But
the
as an-
heat immediately goes away.
like as an engine company though, if I go in and I can see absolutely nothing and the smoke is black as black can be and I can't see my tick, let's just say as engine company at that point we're probably 10% effective, right? So that's going to slow our advance. It's going to slow us getting to see the fire if we run into any victims. If you give me that vertical ventilation, and you could see in that video we just did with Derek once that opened up, and you could see again, and it was more comfortable. You just give me my vision back, and I'm probably instantly moved from 10% to 70% effective
Sure.
as an engine company at that point, just by giving me. You're not going to get full vision, obviously, but you're going to get something back. And I think that's what, again, just not to harp on it too much, but that having vertical ventilation and the right ventilation has been awesome.
Steve, that's a great perspective, I think, of your, put it in percentages, because in zero visibility, especially heat, rising heat, high heat, interior, you have zero visibility and you're trying to open these spaces up without or before vertical ventilation, your working time is reduced radically. And trying to then convey to the next crew that's going to relieve you up here, this is where we've been, this is what we're working on. The conditions are punishing, and with the vertical ventilation, which I don't think we'll ever get away from, and we shouldn't, right? It's so valuable, It
No,
makes a
no.
difference inside, because you're right, when you get your eyes back, you become 70%, 80% more effective. You can see what you're doing. You can coordinate it with the people around you. It makes your working time longer, and that's before we even start to talk about elements, right? Like here where we have snow on the ground and people are dealing with the cold.
Let me dovetail on that elements, but what tactically
Cut. Is that what you mean? Cut?
What tactically changes? Because I think of Winter Avenue, the one on Christmas Eve, with the slate roof. Does that change your tactics if you're having to deal with a slate roof?
Slate roofs, yeah, they change the tactics in the sense of, for the guys doing the vertical ventilation, obviously conditions on the roof in the winter, even in the summer when it's wet. These guys are showing an outstanding performance working from an aerial, which is not always possible.
Right.
All right, but your footing there is different. What I've seen twice in the last 6 months, a consideration I take at the command post is watching slate that's falling off a roof is hazardous, right? People are still advancing the line. They're still throwing ground ladders, and that slate falling down can really cut through you pretty quick.
Yep.
So that's a hazard. So we always try to make sure everybody's aware of that. Some people look up and pay attention to it, but you're not always expecting it to fall off like a shingle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. But, outside of the cold and the slate is the heat outside, right? Your elements outside. When you're sweating before you even start to go in, which takes us like to the Iuka fire that we shared in here too. That was
You want to flip to that?
that was summertime. Minimum staffing. Are we allowed to say minimum staffing?
Absolutely.
I think that's a politically
yeah.
correct term. You can say
It was
15s never has that.
14's
Hey,
either.
can we go
Yeah.
back to that
14's
slide
looks
with
like a clown
one?
car.
the drone?
1 and 7.
So you want Iuka or you want the?
We'll go to Iuka next, but I just want to
video?
highlight the 4 videos of the thermal
Yeah.
imager with the
Let
drone.
me point out real fast on that slate topic. So sometimes I feel like the tendency is when we see slate on a roof, we rule out roof operations in cases like the winter. The important thing to remember, and that falls back to knowing your district, much of the construction in the city of Columbus that has true slate roofs are of the era that the roof decking is one by. So I don't need to make horizontal cuts in that case. So from the tip of an aerial, vertical cuts are very easy. And because it's one by roof decking, it's gonna fall through without the horizontal
It's just
cut.
purlins, essentially.
Absolutely. So don't rule out vertical ventilation because it's wintertime with a slate roof. Don't rule it out because generally the structures that have slate roofs, they're much easier to ventilate in that you don't have to get on the roof and make those horizontal cuts.
Right. But it's a different beast than half-inch OSB and then asphalt shingles. I just wanted to point out the innovative use of like our drones with the thermal imager.
Yeah.
Like how
So
much could that affect our operations if maybe the BC's down and he sees that operation going on, or rolling up on scene and we can get a good thermal imager with a drone view to see what's going on in that perspective?
One thing you notice, the thermal imagers aside, right? But we don't have that drone technology available to the incident commander right away. But as an outside roof operation, if you just look at this roof that they're working on right now, you can see that where the dormer meets the roof on what we'll call this delta side of the structure, there's snow accumulated in that valley. Where they're cutting, there's no snow in that valley. That tells me that there's more heat below that dormer than there is on this end. So there's signs I can look at outside of a thermal drone that tell me where I should be ventilating.
Well, you can spec some things in trucks now where the camera's got, the truck tip has got a FLIR camera on the end of it. So if you put it over a structure, I'm sure that's being
see
relayed
all
back to
that.
a monitor on that truck, because I was
Imagine.
I was just at Madison Township. They're getting ready to put a new truck in. The guy's telling me everything that this ladder's got on it.
Imagine having that up on the platform.
Sure.
When you're making your approach.
And you're in the platform. If you're looking at a screen and it's telling you where the hot spots are. I remember Captain Bishop coming out to our dive training, and he had this the drone up, and you could track the diver. This is how it's picking up different heat signatures. I could track the diver with the air bubbles because they were warmer than the water surrounding the guy. So I knew exactly where the diver was going. I couldn't see him, right? but I could follow the bubble trail.
And it's,
It was pretty impressive.
yeah, and it's probably worth noting why we're specifically talking about this. It is a resource, right, for incident commanders. It's just not going to be your initial resource when it gets there. So Captain Bishop or RS1's office has that drone program. They are available Monday through Friday, 08 to whatever. You can make that call, and as long as he's available and around, that drone can come out. I know they used it.
I got a suggestion for that drone program.
Expand it.
Aids for the battalion chiefs,
Yeah,
and make them all drone nerds.
Drone.
Drone
But I know- I think-
professional operator. that's
Yeah,
a really
absolutely.
manager.
The Chiefs have enough going on with an MDC, a tablet command, 2 radios, and driving the damn vehicle,
Yeah.
that they should have a second set of eyes in there. And if that guy can operate a second radio, go to the Charlie side quickly, put up the drone if we need an aerial view, I don't see any drawbacks to that other than putting an extra body on a vehicle, and let it be the battalion chief's choice, because they don't want to drive around with some idiot all day.
Why did you look at Cheshirr? Why did you look at Brian? Why did you look at him like that?
Now we're getting into weeds.
So
And with that quick, even having that tool in the toolbox for an incident commander, like, I'd be happy if somebody was there running that and I could look at it, but they go back, when Steve's pulling up with the ladder company, let them look at it, let them get the intel they need to decide where they want to put up at, where they want to make a ventilation cut. Because the last thing, in my opinion, that I need to be doing is looking at another computer screen when I need to be seeing the conditions change. You can learn and make decisions so much from what you see, hear, and watch, and staring down at a screen, be it tablet command, which is a valuable tool, or a drone footage, another valuable tool. But you got to be able to have your eyes on the fire too, and use those tools as just an information source. And I'm sure Steve, I'd never heard of the ones mounted on a tip, but having somebody that can get there, and the fastest way to deploy them, I think consistently would be to have like an aide with a battalion chief that can put it up and share the information where it's needed, be it with the first ladder that's there, with a ventilation group in general, or with a second chief to get that information and have it as a feedback, I think would be valuable. But
I mean, look at that image right there, Riley. Like, you could imagine being on the ground, rolling up on the ladder, and then they show you that image. You're like, all right, that's where I'm going. I'm going to go between those 2 dormers right there.
But I think, my very, very brief experience in 1 or 2 times riding out, like, she's 100% right. It's awesome if somebody like showed it to me on the side. I couldn't imagine trying to function through and process that. But I don't want to get too far off on thermal imaging land, but I wanted to highlight something Billy said, because he said it while we were kind of all talking, and Lieutenant Cheshirr, you talked about it on that Berkeley fire that we were on, and I'm sure we'll go back to that later. But
We're going to tell your story in the
Oh,
Berkeley fire. Don't you,
Oh, boy, we
don't
gotta
you think
tell
you're getting out
Hey,
of that
write
one?
that down. I don't want to
That,
forget.
Yeah,
that
we-
one
we-
fire
no,
that Ethan was on.
Yeah.
Ethan's going to
Let's
try
write
to
that
shut
one
this
down.
down before
everybody
we get
has
to
their
that.
moment. Everybody has their moment. But so one thing Lieutenant Ross said as this video played is he's like, man, look at what that water does to that environment. So I'll go back and play it here. I'll show 2 things. And not to spend too much time on thermal imaging, but Billy, just like you said, like, hey, if it's hot, flow water. The amount of improvement to that environment just by cooling it with a stream, and I'll play this up in the top left corner there, and as soon as they open up, their environment improves dramatically. He paints the picture, he cools that space, he resets the environment, and without going too much into the UL land, water is just such a valuable tool to where, like, if you are hot, if it is, if it's still, hidden in the walls and you're looking for reprieve, water's a great place to start, right? And it's immediate because it's in your hand, unlike a ventilation hole that takes a minute. So I wanted to point out that because Billy threw it. And the other thing, because you guys were talking about it earlier, and it just it caught my eye, is when they make this first vent hole and you see this pipe pull down here on the thermal drone, and then watch it stick through the actual dig up here.
Nice.
And if you're standing up in there,
Yeah, you're gonna get donked
you're
in the
going to get
head.
ducked in the head. So it's a great little reminder, like, oh yeah, man, maybe I don't want to be right underneath that.
yeah, next time you do one of those videos, see if you can get a picture of that chainsaw coming through there.
So in one of the hundreds of hours of videos, there is a chainsaw blade that comes through the top of one of these roofs, and it's like, oh, that would be, yep, I see it. Like, let's back up a little bit.
I would like to commend your saw operators on that roof, because I only saw 3 or 4 inches of bar going through that roof. And that's That's more than enough
Yeah, and that's
to
ladder.
get the job done.
Yeah, those are Bristol's guys on ladder 12, and then the other one was ladder 2 actually on 3 unit. They cut the other one with Straube. So obviously super good ladder guys. But I'll kind of springboard off this because we said the word, and I think an Iuka fire is such a unique, scenario, such a large structure, knee walls, voids, and kind of ties in everything we've been bouncing around. So I'll flip to the Iuka fire, and Chief, we can do this picture or we can do the drone picture like that. We can just kind of talk about it. Let's just talk about it for a minute as far as knee walls and incident command and tactics. And I mean, I kind of remember listening to this one.
Was this your fire, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you guys did everything, right? You opened it from below. You cut holes. You had hand lines on multiple floors. This was just kind of a little bit of everything when it comes to avoid space-based fire.
Yeah, I did want to mention too, Steve, watching you talk about that drone video was kind of like watching a radiologist look at an x-ray. You got snow in the valley, you're reading things that other
yeah,
people
he
are like, I see
dissected
orange
it.
and black.
There's a
Yeah,
reason you guys
that
are
was
at that
well
table.
done.
And again, when he switched
Impressive.
Very.
to the live picture of that, you could see the wet areas and the dry areas
Yeah.
on that shingled roof. So
Yeah,
that's going to give
and it
you
is
clues
easy to
where you should be
forget
cutting
that
as well.
you're seeing things that 95% of the people on the Fireground aren't seeing through a thermal imaging camera. But when you truly learn how to use it as a tool, its capabilities and stuff, it means more when you give feedback to an incident commander for sure, when you know that you guys understand, know their limitations, what you can really get out of it. That was nice to hear. That's some good information. This is a summertime fire. It's hot outside already. And we get there. This is on campus on Iuka. So these houses are big. Anybody that's been up through that area knows that this is a make livable bedrooms everywhere you can for student housing, and that's what this was for student housing. Quarter of this amount of smoke when we arrived, and we waited. We were able to, fortunately, we were able to get some really good apparatus placement, which in hindsight was critical here. We had 4 ladders in position, and it ended up being just chasing, right? At first they could go up inside. There was minimal fire showing, but conditions continued to deteriorate as it got more air. But it more than just your typical, what we would talk about like the Cape Cod, where you have a common area behind a knee wall, right on like the Bravo and the Delta side, maybe up in the attic. This one was more broken up, right around where you chase the different areas of the structure, right? It's big. You need a lot of crews. You needed to coordinate, and the construction, the era when it was constructed like this, where you're not working with plywood, you got slate. It was hot, so the guys had to do a lot of ladder work. You could use 4 more ladders here to switch in and out, but it was using thermal imaging cameras. And really, I think what saved this house and why it's still standing is the fact that they used a lot of vertical ventilation and coordination, and things played out really well. You can see in one of the pictures, I don't know if we have that picture up, but one of the pictures from the drone ended up showing, you can see, I don't know, maybe there were at least six vertical vent cuts in the roof.
I don't have it on this slide, but we can definitely throw it up when we're later.
And this was one where slate was landing down on these stairs. Another critical factor, and this one didn't help out either, is it's a story above street level to start out with. But you're advancing hose lines off the trucks. The engine's pulled, right? There was the first engine, I think, was about where we're sitting. So you had room for ladders here, but they're stretching hose lines, kind of like a low rise or something.
Right, mid-rise, whatever.
Yeah.
My first indication, just looking at it, is I'm probably just gonna pull my 250 bed. I want to make sure I got enough hose to get up through all those livable spaces. Especially we got all the ladders right there.
I always thought about that when I was on an engine company, was if you even thought it was going to be in the attic, don't pull the 200, pull the 250.
Yeah, and the guys did a great job, right? Because this is showing a 2-story here, but the finished attic is on the 3rd story, and it's more than a story above the ground.
Discounted as a 4-story building.
Yeah, so you're waiting, right? I mean, there's a significant delay in getting a hose line to the 3rd floor, and we actually made sure we got one to the 2nd floor, right, for protection, egress, and to the 3rd floor as they started making vent cuts and inspection holes and allowing the ladders, right? It just worked out well in this one, that the delay of getting aerials set up and getting guys to the roof to start making cuts. There was also a delay in getting the hose lines into position because of the distance. But this is one, when we talk about the elements, people working inside and outside are dealing with the elements and the heat. And inside, if you have to keep rotating crews because the conditions are so bad that you can't work inside, it puts you further behind the curve, which is why those vertical ventilation cuts are critical.
And that slate is like a brick oven, so it's holding a lot more heat.
Yeah, and the intel you get back from the inside means everything, right? You can make judgments from the outside all you want, but until you hear from the inside, the smoke conditions, the heat conditions, what you're finding, where you need things, it's my belief anyway. Not, you don't micromanage it from the sidewalk without having good intel from the inside to help put the resources where they need to be.
Did you sector that fire off with the amount of companies that were there, and utilize some of your other battalion chiefs to handle a certain area?
We ended up, I was on what we had as the A side. So from my viewpoint, we did end up with a second chief that was on the Bravo Charlie corner, who had a lot better view of things, and he was kind of running the roof operations, and I was running the interior operations, more or less. We didn't break it up and identify it, change radio channels,
Right,
but
yeah.
I was trying to coordinate that stuff, hose line placement, crews, keeping crews ready to rotate in, and he was taking care of the effective part of the ventilation.
So I think Bill, you just said something we haven't actually hit on too much here, which is the stretch part of this. So inherently, these buildings, whether it's the inner city, we think bigger, 3,000, 2,500 square foot, singles, doubles, and we're talking 3rd story, for these half stories.
Yeah.
The Cape Cod's is probably a little different, right? We get away with the 200 bed.
Sure.
The stairs are a little more obvious on where we're finding, but I don't know can you guys talk to these bigger buildings, these older homes, those stretches, the manpower required for that stretches, and kind of maybe some of these stairs aren't in the most obvious places, right? When these guys are looking around. So a new company officer coming up, 2nd floor, and be like, how do I even get up there? And where you found things or stairwells in the past, and just kind of how that stretch works
Yeah.
for you, and attacking primary lines and backup lines, right? As far as committing more people to get one line in play, or just kind of that blanket statement.
Well, I think when you're doing hand line selection, you're thinking, right, I gotta take into account setback. Of course, this thing's up on a hill, so we're already losing 50 from the street to the front door. And now how do I get to the 3rd floor? Where are the stairs? And typically in the districts that I worked, of course, I rarely spent any time on campus or in campus housing, so I can't speak to how cut up they are, but I can imagine how they modify these places for individual living units and things like that, SROs, single room occupancies, whatever they want to call them. I'm thinking, of course, Lieutenant Robertson, Engine 18 on 3 unit, he preaches putting your truck in the right place, estimating your stretch. Do you need the 200 or the 250? And I always thought if I had even close to being in an attic fire or extension of the attic, I was thinking the 250 line. And then your staffing, Chief hit on it earlier, called it minimum staffing. Of course, engine companies are 1 and 2 or 0 and 3 until 8 o'clock at night, unless you're which we've upgraded our single engine houses to 4 firefighters every day. at least 4 people on those trucks every day, which is phenomenal, that we're doing that for those guys, because they need the staffing. But if you pulled up here on engine 13 or engine 7, who was first, Chief?
Engine 7.
Engine 7. So you pull up on engine 7 with an officer and 2 firefighters. You got a guy run the pump, and you and your backstep firefighter getting a 250 line to the attic is going to be a challenge, right? And again, I always used to say this when I was assigned to an engine company. I said, if ladder company guys touch hose, they won't spontaneously combust. So go ahead and reach down there and put your hand on it and help these short-staffed engine crews get that line up through the stairs. But then again, Ethan, you asked, how do you know where the attic stairs are? Well, I had a couple things that I always do down in the south end is, or on the west side where we've got these types of structures, is the stairs are stacked on themselves. If I got a side entrance, I know it spirals all the way to the top. And I got a staircase that is off the front door or off the dining room. I go and I look into a bedroom that is just off of those staircases on the second floor for the attic access. If I don't see it there, I start looking for a scuttle in the middle of the ceiling. Because it's not always a finished space. Sometimes it's just a scuttle with attic storage. So just looking in a few obvious places to find that next staircase to get up are the bedrooms adjacent to the stairwell. If it's a side entrance from the ground, it will spiral all the way up, generally to the attic space. And then just, trying to use some of that seniority that we've developed over the years to look at the most obvious spots first.
Means a lot when you know what kind of information you're getting back based on who you're talking to. There's a few stories I could talk about with that. This particular fire, the first 2 companies with me on the scene, Rick Callahan
Sure.
was on engine 7, and Paul Richards on engine 13. And you can see we were waiting on the 2 downtown ladders were our first ladder companies. Another thing I'll point out while I'm just thinking about it, with the knee walls or the finished attic areas, and Ethan, there's another video I found that I'm going to send to you that shows the rapid change in conditions. When you get in, Steve mentioned earlier, when you get in and like there's visibility's great. And this is one where it happened. The engine companies just going up and looking for those stairwells, were able to get a very rapid, right, all clear on the primary. And as an incident commander, getting that primary all clear.
That's huge in campus housing.
Huge,
Sure.
yeah. And so taking the opportunity, and if you're on the engine company and you're there first and you're scouting, finding those stairs and stuff, and you have that chance to get a quick visibility of a finished attic area, get it, because in 5 or 10 minutes, it may become a lot more difficult. Heat and smoke conditions. I'll send that one to you. And this one, the conditions got up there, got to be untenable a little bit. But once that changes, it changes everything.
Yeah. Cut.
Cut.
You gotta go.
Cut.
This is